again, like Dahlia mentioned, those fungi or those other bacteria are just going to use that and grow right back, and sometimes even more in more abundance. Yeah.
So thank you for that answer. Something that's gotten more popular over the decades is gluten allergies and gluten sensitivities.
Mhm.
What comprehensive advice would you offer to help manage their dietary choices, and what's the impact on the gut of gluten? Is everyone to some extent impacted by gluten, especially the kind in the United States? Is my understanding, like people go to other countries, they go to Europe, they're like, I could eat bread and pasta and I didn't feel bloated.
Mhm.
But when I come back home, I feel terrible. What are your thoughts on gluten?
I think such a big factor in that. Whenever someone does tell me that I can travel overseas, eat wheat there, it doesn't bother me, but I come here, it's really the quality of the wheat that we have. It's the extreme hybridization that has been performed on the wheat, the specific wheat species. We do know that we use high yield wheat, and also we're not appreciating the whole process, right? I think in the last couple of years, people have gotten into making bread and they see how much love and care and work goes into that starter and the fermentation process and the days and days of work that go in that. When we're factory producing, you know,
Wheat
white bread
products.
and wheat
Yeah.
products out there, we're not enabling, again, that microbial process. Yeast is usually involved in that. That yeast is going to break down some of the gluten protein or the gliadin protein to make it more easily digested by us as humans. So when we're trying to cut out that middleman and say like, oh, all right, yeast, do your thing for 2 hours, and then after that we have to move on, that's oftentimes why people have non-celiac gluten sensitivity or gluten intolerance. Yes, we do know also celiac disease is on the rise, and celiac disease is an autoimmune condition. So that also begs the question, what was the state of that person's microbiome before they developed celiac disease if it wasn't something more genetically involved?
Thank you. And if you guys are okay, our next speaker is running about 5 minutes behind. Do you mind
Yeah,
ending the Q&A for about 5 minutes?
yeah,
Yeah,
not
no
at
I
all.
feel like you
problem.
have so much more that you would love that you can say. So, all
We
right,
could be
good.
here another 2 hours.
Hey, you know what? Let me see if we can reschedule our next speaker, and we'll keep you here for another 2 hours. So, antibiotics. So, especially, we just got out of the pandemic. We're an antibiotic fueled society. How do people recover? Like, what is the best way to recover their gut health after doing a regimen of antibiotics?
So, interestingly, we used to recommend taking a probiotic along with the antibiotic. And in 2019, there was a really comprehensive study that compared a couple different groups. So, all of these three groups were administered an antibiotic. And with one group, they had taken a fecal sample from them prior to giving them antibiotics. The second group, they were given probiotics along with antibiotics. The third group was given nothing. And so, they actually found that the group that recovered their original microbiome the slowest was the group who took probiotics along with the antibiotics. So the one that got fecal microbiome transplant, analogous fecal microbiome transplant, they recovered it the quickest. You're basically putting their microbiome back in them. You're giving them fecal transplant. But the ones who were taking probiotics, we can kind of assume that it had almost a competitive effect because with most probiotics, you're getting in a handful, maybe two handfuls of different strains, but there's a lot of them. So maybe you're taking 30 billion colony forming units of three different strains. We
Mhm.
have thousands of strains in the gut in different amounts. And so when you're just bombing the gut with one specific strain, not knowing if that's the strain that you need, that can inhibit some of your natural strains from repopulating. So what we do now recommend instead, unless somebody has a really serious condition like inflammatory bowel disease or they've had recurrent C. diff, we just say don't take probiotics when you're taking the antibiotics. Let them do their thing if you absolutely need them. And always ask your provider, do I absolutely need this? What can I take instead if I don't absolutely need this antibiotic? But if you do, eat fiber. So eat prebiotics because that's going to feed you the bugs that did survive in your gut and eat probiotic foods. So that's a gentle reinoculation. You're adding small amounts back in. You're hoping to feed these bugs, and then you're introducing more bugs while you take the antibiotic. After you finish, you can determine from there, are the foods doing it for me? Am I feeling good with just eating probiotic foods? If so, continue on. If not, you might consider a
I have
probiotic.
to give a quick visual to that. Imagine an empty field in Southern California, in Costa Rica, in Beijing, in Alaska, what's going to grow there is very different if we just left that field. We've all seen a field be empty for a couple months and then it starts growing native species. That's essentially what we're saying is you have to regrow your native gut species. That's different from your uncle, your aunt, your neighbor down the street. And so the way
If it
we
was
do that,
good.
if it was good, but ideally, if you're doing that with the plants, the prebiotics, the probiotics, it's going to bring back your native species in higher amounts, ideally over time. You can also help that. So those things are going to help transplant. Oh, my neighbor's farm and garden looks native and good. Let me transplant some of that to speed this along. Rather than what you're doing with just a general probiotic is going to each field in every ecosystem, I'm going to plant the same seeds. And now you're competing with different plants that aren't even supposed to be there. Hopefully that makes sense. That's just like an
Yeah,
analogy there, but
absolutely.
yeah.
I was actually expecting a financial analogy there.
No
Oh, okay.
financial advice on this.
Yeah.
So, so do you recommend against taking, probiotic capsules in general?
No, I would say it depends on the person. So it depends on what they have going on. We know if they have SIBO, if they have dysbiosis, don't take a probiotic. You're adding fuel to a fire. If you're somebody who has significant antibiotic use and maybe weren't eating a diverse diet and you're constipated or you have diarrhea, there's specific strains for specific conditions. So you just want to make sure you're taking the right probiotic. And so you can use data and evidence to really pick the right probiotic for you. If you really want to get into the nitty gritty and try to understand your own microbiome, that's where maybe some of those highly specialized stool tests come in. But I'm not against probiotics. I will often recommend them to the right person. To some people, I say, don't take it. To other people, I'm saying, take this one.
Great, thank you. And what is a gut-related symptom that people would be surprised was related to their gut?
Mm, there's so many. I would say rosacea could be one of them. The reddening of the skin could be a gut symptom. Hair loss, if it doesn't make sense as far as hormones go.
I would say food allergies and intolerances. I mean, a lot of people don't think that that's related, and it's heavily related. And so that's a big one where it's very close, but a lot of people are disconnected from that. Eczema. What else did you say? You said rosacea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some big ones where people are like, really? What? Oh, wow. And yeah.
Mhm.
So, thank you. So you had mentioned in one of your answers about fecal transplants, and I remember hearing that a few years ago, and you're like, "What is that?" And so, can you explain to the audience what is a fecal transplant, and what does the research show about its efficacy in helping people with various issues? Is my understanding. So, I'd like to hear what you have to
Yeah.
say.
So I always have to say it's only FDA approved currently in the US to be used for a specific condition, C. diff. So if somebody has C. difficile overgrowth, they have chronic diarrhea that's debilitating and life-threatening, then currently you can go to a hospital, go to a gastroenterologist, and they can either lavage you with a stool sample from a very vetted stool donor. So this donor has to have a stellar microbiome themselves. They really heavily vet donors. So they haven't had taken antibiotics for years. They have a great diet, they're active, they have a healthy body composition. So you're not just getting poop from anyone. It's a very heavily vetted donor. And either you're taking that as a lavage, so it's rectally administered, or you're taking what's known as a crapsule, so it's a poop capsule, and it's timed release, so it can really just get into the colon. But we are seeing, I'm always curious out there. So I join lots of different Facebook groups. So I'm seeing people are kind of jimmy rigging this and they're doing it on their own. I've heard people saying like, hey, my partner is giving me their stool. Well, you want to really be careful because again, you want to find someone who should have a similar microbiome to you. So you don't want to be taking male to female stool because hormones will look very different. Body composition will look very different. They've done studies that actually showed they did a fecal transplant from mother to daughter. The mother was obese, the daughter was not. And the daughter didn't change her habits, her lifestyle, her diet at all. But after that FMT, that fecal microbiome transplant, she became obese, just like her mother. So we are seeing you can actually inadvertently transfer things you didn't want to transfer. So you want to be just mindful and careful as to who you're taking FMT for, and always consult with your care team, because you could do more harm than good if you just don't know exactly what you're doing.
And this is a poop transplant for those that don't
Yeah.
realize. This is transferring poop, and poop is powerful. So you see the power of poop for sure.
Because the poop really is going to have lots of microbes in it. In our colon, we have over 38 trillion microbes. They're a majority, they're like 95+% of the bugs that we have living in the entire GI tract from mouth to anus. So that's really the hub of where they're at. So if you kind of take that medium on which they're fermenting, they're living, they're creating families, and then they're leaving the body, then you can transfer that from person to person, hopefully in a safe and healthy way.
Great, thank you. And now, not talking about fecal transplants, how does being around other people, like you're talking about going to college or going to other conditions, and I've seen information on this about how microbiomes can start converging. What's the impact on that? Does that and how does that happen? And I guess it's kind of gross how that happens, but exactly how does that transfer from one person to the other? I assume it's not just a mental transfer, so there's some transmission going on.
No, I mean, so yeah, a really great study done on roommates cohabitating. And so before they started cohabitating, they took a sequence of their microbiome as best as we know how right now. And they took it after they've been living. I think they had increments, if memory serves me correctly, at certain months and markers throughout the time they're living together. And what they found is a person before living with certain people resembled their familial microbiome. So it resembled, you could look at a family and go, oh yeah, they have similar microbiomes. They're a family. Very cool. What happened is when someone lives with someone, and I'm trying to remember the exact time frame, so don't quote me on this, but it could roughly even be from 6 months to several years, they start to resemble a gut microbiome like who they're living with more than their family. So studies show this. How is this happening? Everything, all of the above. It's breathing the same air as them, it's being in the same room, it's possibly sharing food, it's touching the same surfaces.
Dishes.
If we could put on glasses and see the microbes around us, it would freak us out. There's a reason why we can't see them, right? It would just be literally everything would be crawling in microbes. And that's not even getting into the virome, which is essentially the microbiome is that of the microbes exclusive of the virome, which are viruses. They outnumber bacteria roughly 10-1. So you would see a sea of viruses as well that we're sharing. Food has viruses. We have viruses. Your animals have viruses, and they're all interacting. Viruses are even more interesting because there's bacterial viruses that help to transfer DNA from the food we eat to the bacteria in our gut to then the viruses in our body. So all of this is a transfer of data. What we're missing out on is data. So if you want more data on your phone, it's like your phone carrier offering you unlimited data and you're going, no, thank you. That's like what you're saying when you're not eating plants, when you're not around healthy people in nature. The list goes on and on. You're missing out on a data transfer that helps your body.
You could have an inadvertent data transfer. I'm really particular. Yeah. I actually won't share food with friends, even at a restaurant. I'm like, hey, can we all use a serving spoon? No one put your fork in the dish that we're all sharing, because I don't know where your microbiome has been. And I don't think I want your microbiome. I've had patients tell me, I had a friend who had a yeast infection, and after I shared a dessert with that friend, I got a yeast infection. So I'm really particular. I encourage my patients to be particular as well, because unless you really know that person, know where their microbiome's been, and know that you want their microbes and they have a healthy microbiome, be really mindful about who you're sharing microbes with. That could be, again, just sharing food, sharing a drink, sharing an unwashed dish with them, kissing them, further than that. So you want to make sure you're downloading things that you want in your gut.
Or you find those really healthy people and just lick their plates and foot out.
Yes, you two must be wonderfully popular at dinner parties, I can imagine.
Yes, totally.
So with that, just what would you like to share as a final thought for gut health and how people can improve it?
Overall, I like to say, again, I have to reiterate the story of connection. I mean, that's really what this is about. It's connecting with your loved ones. It's hopefully, if you're learning this, it is bringing it into your household, whether it's your family or your roommates, because really it is a story of connection where it's not just, it's great if you can do it, wonderful, but you do want to help others do it because the health of others really influences your health. So you can start with you and your actions, but really have the mindset that it doesn't just end with me. So that's the message I would say. And well, what about you?
I would say, even if you are deep in your gut debt and you've experienced a lot along your gut journey, there is always hope. You can always heal with each meal. It really is just staying motivated and resolving to see that future you, that future healed you. But I really believe everyone can heal with each meal. The degree to which they will heal will differ, but the healing is out there. So, we're out here really ready to support and motivate people. There are so many others who are out there in this fight with us who we're so grateful for. So that's why we put out tons of resources, whether we show up on summits like this, or we have free blogs on our website, or if someone wants to work with one of our care team members one-on-one, if someone is interested in, adding something, a complement to their diet, like our gut nurture that we formulated, I think all of these different things can help you heal with each meal. It's really just you resolving to want that.
Great. And with that, I'd like to thank you for all the information that you shared. If we could unmute the audience so they can share their appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm hanging up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.